Zdravo! Sa univerziteta vam i ovoga puta prenosimo važne informacije. Dobrodošli u vaš vodič sa Internacionalnog univerziteta u Novom Pazaru. Nemačka fondacija Friedrich Ebert kancelariju u Srbiji donirala je Internacionalnom univerzitetu u Novom Pazaru 400 naslova. Knjige su iz oblasti prava, ekonomije, političkih nauka, sociologije, jezika i kulture na srpskom, nemačkom i engleskom jeziku.
Upoznavši ljude iz fondacije Friedrich Ebert Stiftung kancelarije u Beogradu, inače fondacije iz Nemačke, sa radom našeg univerziteta, katedrama, fakultetima koje imamo, kao i našom bibliotekom, došli smo na ideju da ta fondacija našem univerzitetu donira 400 knjiga iz različitih oblasti na engleskom, nemačkom, a dobar deo knjiga je i na srpskom jeziku. U tom smislu ova fondacija je danas nama poklonila 400 knjiga iz oblasti prava, ekonomije, humanističkih nauka, ali i iz oblasti jezika i kulture.
Kako je istakao magistar Rejhan Kurtović, asistent na Internacionalnom univerzitetu u Novom Pazaru, ova donacija knjiga biće od velike koristi studentima ovog univerziteta u njihovom daljem usavršavanju.
Ovo će značiti studentima puno, obzirom da se radi na određene studije, istraživačke projekte koji su novijeg datuma, novijeg u smislu da je to od 2011. godine, pa dakle do 2013. novijeg datuma, zbog toga što je to literatura koju mi nemamo u dobrom delu u našoj biblioteci, jer se radi o literaturi koja obuhvata i neke zemlje u inostranstvu sa uporednim aspektom i na Srbiju. Tako da će naši studenti koji budu proučavali ove knjige imati jedno široko znanje iz oblasti prava, ekonomije ili političkih nauka, ali ne samo sa aspekta gledano na Srbiju, već i na druge zemlje u okruženju, ali i u svetu.
Drago mi je da se možemo pohvaliti 4. donacijom knjiga ove akademske godine. Zahvaljujući našem asistentu, magistru Rejhanu Kurtoviću, donirano je 400 knjiga, uglavnom iz oblasti prava.
Na Internacionalnom univerzitetu u Novom Pazaru boravio je ambasador Švajcarske, njegova ekscelencija Jean Daniel Ruch. Ambasadora je primio rektor, profesor dr. Mevlu Dudić.
Danas je Internacionalni univerzitet u Novom Pazaru posjetio švajcarski ambasador Jean Daniel Ruch. Njega je primio rektor Internacionalnog univerziteta Mevlu Dudić. Ovom prilikom ambasador Švajcarske je održao predavanje studentima Internacionalnog univerziteta na temu švajcarsko iskustvo sa manjinama i jezicima manjina.
I think the people were listening, they were attentive.
Ja sam vrlo zadovoljna, studenti su me pažljivo slušali i bili su vrlo uključeni u ono što govorim i mislim isto da je moje predavanje značajno i sa jedne i druge strane, zato što u mojoj zemlji ima jako puno pripadnika bošnjačkih nacionalnih zajednica.
Bošnjak.
Rektor Internacionalnog univerziteta u Novom Pazaru Mevlu Dudić je ukazao na značaj posete švajcarskog ambasadora, izrazio zadovoljstvo što je tako značajan gost posjetio ovaj univerzitet i raduje se daljoj saradnji koja je od velikog značaja za univerzitet kao i za sve studente ovog univerziteta.
Smatram da ćemo u skoroj budućnosti aplicirati kod švajcarske ambasade i dobiti određeni broj stipendija za studente koji su zainteresirani da nastave školovanje u Švicarskoj. Svakako za nas bi također bilo od izuzetnog značaja iskustvo koje imaju u obrazovnom sistemu Švicarske da i mi implementiramo na našem univerzitetu. Evo danas je njegova ekscelencija ambasador govorio studentima o raznim jezicima koji su u upotrebi u Švicarskoj, jer Švicarska je nešto što svako priželjkuje, a imajući u vidu da sa područja Sandžaka veliki broj građana živi i radi u Švicarskoj, kao i mladi. San svakog studenta jeste da jednoga dana posjeti Švicarsku i da se uvjeri za ono što zaista jeste Švicarska, odnosno primjer u svakom pogledu, posebno u sferi obrazovanja.
Ambasador Švajcarske je prilikom posjete Internacionalnom univerzitetu u Novom Pazaru u velikoj sali održao predavanje za studente na temu švajcarsko iskustvo sa manjinama i jezicima manjina.
Uvažene koleginice i kolege, dame i gospodo, dozvolite mi da izrazim radost i zadovoljstvo da na početku drugog semestra počašćeni smo da nas je prvi čovjek švajcarske ambasade, njegova ekscelencija, gospodin Jean Daniel Ruch, boravi na našem univerzitetu i evo mi ćemo, dakle, uvodno današnje izlaganje za današnji dan imat će njegova ekscelencija, gospodin ambasador, na temu švajcarsko iskustvo sa manjinama i jezicima manjina. Manje više svima vama je poznato kako je uređenje u Švicarskoj i kod nas u najmanju ruku se često puta može čuti riječ tačan kao Švajcarac. I on je danas zaista bio u 11:30 tačno u rektoratu i evo mojom krivicom, dakle minut prije 12 smo krenuli, ali sam ga ja malo da pogledamo neke prostorije našeg univerziteta i kasnimo 5 minuta. Svakako da želim da se njemu najtoplije zahvalim i ne bi da oduzimamo njegovog vremena jer će on na engleskom jeziku se vam obratiti, a ja sam rekao da naši studenti bolje govore i razumiju engleski jezik nego Švajcarci. Ja ću njega zamoliti, svakako i u ime studenta, profesora i svih saradnika, najtoplije mu se zahvaliti da je nas počastio boravkom na našem univerzitetu, zamolit ću ga. Čim ga zamolim, to znači naredba, 20 do 25 minuta da se drži tajminga, jer studenti imaju drugih obaveza, a onda ćemo ostaviti mogućnost da studenti mogu i da postave eventualno nekoliko pitanja. Gospodine ambasadore, floor is yours. You're welcome.
Dobar dan. Izvinite da nije, kažem, srpski ili hrvatski ili bosnjanski ili crnogorski mnogo dobro. Moram da kažem pa engleski i nadam se da sve razumete. So, I have been asked to speak about the minority languages in Switzerland, and actually speaking about the minority languages in Switzerland is speaking about the whole of Switzerland, because we are a country of minority languages. There is no dominating language, because if you look at the statistics, in theory, German would be the most spoken language in Switzerland, with about 63% of the population. The problem is that the German, which is being spoken in Berlin, Basel, Zurich, or in our mountains, is not the same. We have about 30,000 German immigrants in Zurich nowadays, and many of them complain because they don't understand the television, the radio, they don't understand the people in the street, they don't understand the people in the restaurant. To give you an example, a word as simple as butter, you know, butter, to eat in the morning. In Germany it's the same as here actually, it's Butter. Now in Switzerland it becomes Ankre, which is a quite different word. Something as beautiful in German as I love you, ich liebe dich, is beautiful. It will become ich liebe dich, which is still more or less understandable. But when you come to Bern, it becomes ich hatte gern, and this is certainly not the way a French speaker would declare its flame to a woman. So this is why, keeping in mind these differences, I would like to give an overview first about the structure of our national languages. Secondly, how does that fit with the territory, which languages are being spoken where. Thirdly, I want to speak about our legal and especially constitutional provisions regarding languages, which I think is one of the cornerstones of the peace in Switzerland. Fourthly, I want to speak about how the various languages are being used, especially at the federal level, in the government, or for official use. And 5, I would like to raise a few current issues regarding languages in my country. So as I said before, we have 63% of the population about which are speaking German, or rather a German dialect. They are located, this region, which is more or less homogeneous, is center-northeast of the country. French is being spoken by about 22–23% of the population, and it is the western side of Switzerland. Then Italian is being spoken by about 6% of the population, and this is the southern side, essentially. And we have a fourth national language, but which is not an official language, meaning that it is not being used in official documents. This fourth language is called Romansh Grishun. It is a Latin dialect which is still spoken by roughly 40,000 people, which means only 0.5% of the Swiss population. Now, probably some of you are studying mathematics, and if you add the figures I have just given, you will find that you reach barely 90%. So what are the 10 other percent of the population speaking? Maybe they don't speak. Swiss people are very mute and are not very known to be very eloquent. But in which language do they not speak? Well, 10% of the population, of the residing population, have as a mother tongue other languages. Basically, these are foreigners who came to Switzerland later and who have kept as their mother tongue the language of their country of origin, which is neither French nor German nor Italian. And among those 10% of foreign languages, I must say that what we call BCS, Bosnian, Croatian, Serbian, is a very important part of these 10%. Albanian is another very important part. Turkish is another very important part, in that order. Now, you would think, if you would be logical, I think that Switzerland and Serbia, maybe with Belgium, are probably the most multicultural and multinational countries in Europe. I'm always amazed to see how Serbia has a large diversity of groups, especially when I consider Vojvodina with, I think, over 30 different groups. In Western Europe, I think we can compare only with Belgium. But we are very different from Belgium. Because you would think, in accordance with what I said, 63% German in the east, 23% French in the west, 6% Italian in the south, then a few Romansh in the far east, that there should be actually 3 cantons and maybe a half cantons from the Romansh. And that there would be a coincidence between the language spoken and the way the territory is being cut and carved, and between the various entities which compose Switzerland. For instance, in Belgium, you have one entity which is Flemish-speaking, one entity which is French-speaking, Wallonie, and then you have Brussels with a special status. In Switzerland, it says not at all, not at all. The cantons in Switzerland, which are the second territorial unit, the first territorial unit is what we call the commune, not quite like the municipality. The commune is much smaller than the municipality. We have about 2,400 communes, which then are grouped into 23 cantons. Now, among those 23 cantons, one is trilingual. This is the canton of Graubünden, which is at the far east. near the Austrian border in the north and the Italian border in the south. And there you have 3 official languages: Romansh Grishun, German, and Italian. You have a few cities, a few communes in this canton who speak also Italian. Then we have 3 cantons out of those 23 who are bilingual, French and German, with various majorities. One of them, which is mine, has a majority of 95% of German speakers and a minority, of which I come, of 5% of French speakers. Another one, Valais, has roughly a majority of 2/3 French speaker, 1/3 German speaker, and this is true also for the third one, which is Fribourg. So 1 trilingual, 3 bilingual, 4 are purely francophones, where francophone only is being spoken. Then 1 is purely Italophone, this is in the south. And finally, you have 14 cantons and half cantons, because in our system we have not only cantons, we have also half cantons, but I will not enter into these details. 3 cantons have fought in the 19th centuries, and as a kind of punishment for being bad boys and quarreling against each other, they got cut into 2 half cantons. It was mostly fights between land and city and Protestants and Catholics. So those 14 cantons and half cantons are using German dialects in the daily life. But, and this is sort of the schizophreny, whereas the language being used in the daily life is a dialect, and there are major differences between the dialect spoken in Basel, the dialect spoken in Zurich, the dialect spoken in Bern. The language which is being used in the newspapers, the spoken language, is German from Germany. So that's a kind of schizophreny, and actually it's always amazing when a Swiss German-speaking speaker makes a speech in German. Very often the text is drafted in German, but he speaks Swiss German. And I can tell you it's quite difficult sometimes to follow what he's saying. For people like us who learn German at school, but not Swiss German. If I would dare a risky comparison with your region, I would say that the difference between Bosniansky, Czarnogorski, Hrvatski, Serbski is probably similar as the difference between Basler Dutch, Zürich Dutch, Berner Dutch, Walliser Dutch is a bit more difficult. But a German from Germany who comes to Switzerland for the first time and who tries to understand, I don't know, a TV program in Swiss German, he will be completely lost. It is a different language. However, even though the language is somewhat different from one city to another, or from one canton to another, usually the people, they understand each other, usually. So, as you see, the system is quite complex, because we have 4 national languages, but they are distributed within 23 cantons, and each canton has its own very strong identity. Now, how is that ruled by the law and by the Constitution? There are 2 principles. The first one is that anybody is free to use its own language in the private life. The second principle, which in my view is the cornerstone of the Swiss system, of the Swiss democracy, and probably also of Swiss peace, is the principle of territoriality of languages. It means that the borders, the boundaries between the various linguistic regions are fixed and cannot change. To give you an example, there is a small city not far from my place, where at one point in time there have been some immigration, which is French-speaking traditionally, which is part of the French-speaking region, even though in the canton of Bern, which is in majority German. And because the houses were cheaper, the apartments were cheaper, there was a movement from German speakers into this city, to the point that the majority was about to change. So there was a demand from the German-speaking community in this little city to have the official documents also in German, and to open a school, a public school, where you don't have to pay in German. Yet, this was refused according to the principle of the territoriality of languages. And this is probably the most important tool to protect the minorities and to protect the minority languages. Because otherwise, as a minority, you always face the risk of being overwhelmed by immigration from another group. The rules on which language is being taught at school are ruled at the local or at the cantonal level. The Confederation only speaks about the territoriality of languages. But then all the detailed modalities and procedures are being decided at the local level. To give you an example, Pontresina. Pontresina is a beautiful ski resort in Graubünden, in this region where Romansch-Grischun has its roots. Now, Pontresina has a population of 15% of people who are born with the mother tongue Romansch-Grischun, and 85% who are German speakers, Swiss German of course, but German speaker originally. Now you would think, what is the language which is being taught at school? I mean, to speak about geography, history, mathematics, what is the language? It is Romansch-Grischun, because it was decided by the commune, by the city authorities, that we want to preserve our language, and the only way to preserve our language is to make it the communication language at school. You drive 15 minutes, you come to St. Moritz, which has about the same situation, 15%, 85%. There, the language which is being used at school for mathematics, geography, history, and so on, is German, because the local authorities in St. Moritz, they decided it was more important. This is democracy at its roots. We take those important decisions at the communal level and not at any higher level. Let me give you also the example of we have two bilingual cities, where officially both languages, German and French, are in use and are official. It means that the city authorities are obliged to have all documents being translated in both languages. It means also, for instance, that the street names are being in both languages. I think it's a bit like that in the Preševo Valley, by the way. Or in Vojvodina. Now you will tell me what is the language which is being taught in the schools in those two cities, Bienne and Fribourg. Well, the answer is that we have separate schools. All the way up to the end of the high school, you put your children either to the French-speaking school or to the German-speaking school. And myself, I have been to the high school in Bienne, and you would think that this proximity favors the communications, the contacts, and the learning of the other's language. Now, I am afraid to have to tell you that when I was doing my high school in Bienne, I was in a building, and the next building, you know, there was a kind of courtyard, so it was maybe 40 meters away, was a German-speaking gymnasium. I never exchanged a word during 3 years with somebody from the German-speaking school. Not because we hate or whatever, because why make the effort? My daughter, and then I thought my daughter, just completed her gymnasium in the very same school with the very same setting, and I asked her, so how many German speakers do you know? And she told me, never met any one of them. This is a bit sad, but this is the reality. I think there are some people who say that Swiss people get along well because they don't understand each other. So basically we get along well because we ignore each other. Now let me, before closing, say a few words about what I consider the key issues which are being discussed now regarding the use of languages. Well, the first thing I should say is that there is no, what makes this specificity and what makes the fact that we are pretty immune to the interference from our neighbors is that there is no strong bind, other than maybe cultural, which relates our various linguistic groups with the neighboring countries. The French-speaking part has never been part of France, and France is a different country, very different from our point of view. Actually, in many ways, we have a mentality which is much closer to the German-speaking Swiss than to French, even though we understand, we speak exactly the same language, but we have no bound. This is true also for the Italian speakers in Italy. This is true also for the German speakers and Germany. And I must say this prevents us from, this creates a very strong centripetal force, a very strong bind between all the countries. And that prevents us from centrifugal forces. There has never been any separatist movement in Switzerland which wanted to join France, or to join Germany, or to join Italy. This is completely unthinkable for us because our historical roots are there, and as Swiss, we have never been part of either, as French speakers of France, as Italian speakers of Italy, as German speakers of Germany. That's why, to quote an anecdote, I don't know if you remember late Muammar al-Gaddafi from Libya. So, as you know, he died after a war. Now, what few people remember is that during the 2 years that preceded this war, while Mr. Gaddafi was received in Paris and elsewhere, we have fought all alone a diplomatic war with Gaddafi, who had held 2 Swiss businessmen hostage, because the police in Geneva sued him, arrested him first and sued him because he had mistreated his servants. And of course the dear leader was very angry because we had dared to touch his son, so he kept hostage, sometimes in difficult conditions, 2 businessmen. And at one point in time during this crisis, Mr. Gaddafi went to the United Nations and asked for Switzerland, he tabled a resolution in the General Assembly asking for Switzerland to be dismantled, saying that the German part should be returned to Germany, the French part should be returned to France, and the Italian part to Italy. This is a complete misunderstanding of the reality and of the history of Switzerland. And the Bureau of the General Assembly decided that this resolution would not be valid, and it was never actually tabled. But that is very important to understand that, because that makes the specificity. One of the biggest issues now in Switzerland is what is the first, now it would look a bit awkward, the first second language that should be taught in Switzerland. Traditionally in the French-speaking area, when the children go to school, in the 3rd or 4th year of study, in the French-speaking part, they would learn German as the most important other national language, and in the German-speaking part, traditionally they used to have French as the first foreign language. Now, under the impact of Zurich, it has changed, and in the primary school, the first language being taught in most German-speaking cantons is now English, which I think is a big mistake. There have been some debates, but it's their sovereign right to decide that at the cantonal level, so there is nothing we can do about it, except to show our wisdom by keeping German as the second foreign language being taught at school. But it is certain that the fact that because of this decision, the German-speaking people will master less French will be a problem in our relation. The third issue is that the German speakers, they love their dialect so much that I see an increased reluctance, even while talking to people like me, a civil servant, to use the Hochdeutsch, the German of Germany, and there is an increased use of the dialect, which makes the communication difficult because really the language we learn at school has nothing to do with the language which is spoken. Finally, there is a risk, and I think it is a risk on the diversity of Switzerland, that more and more we will use English in our relations with our compatriots from Zurich or from Geneva. English is very often already now the main communication language within the multinationals, the big companies which have their seat in my country. And even in our development agency now there is a tendency to write everything in English. In the name of, it's much easier, we all speak English, let's speak English. I think by using only English, you lose a lot of diversity which go way beyond the language, which has to do with the culture, with tradition, as also at the end of the day, with ways of thinking. So I think we should cultivate our difference, cultivate our traditions, our culture, but of course, while also maintaining the good sense that what is important in a country is that everybody can get along well with the others. And communication is important, and language is important. And I'm happy that our friends from Zurich and our friends from Bern, even when each one of them speaks their dialect, they still feel that they are part of the same country. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much. Before the question, we have, I think, 8 minutes for question. I'd like to tell 3 things. The first, from today until the end, you are part of this university. Second, you have been today in the best university in the Serbia. The third, here are the students and professors, the best in the Europe. And now, it's not 8 minutes, 7 minutes. We have from 3 to 5 questions. You can speak Serbian, Bosnian, English, Italian and German. Evo, kako vam je najlakše, budite vrlo kratki sa pitanjima, jer ambasador ima obavezu 15 prije izjave za medije, 15 do 1 da otputuje. Izvolite.
Our education system is done in such a way that the admission to the universities is a competence of the universities themselves. So there is no laws which would prevent or encourage anything like that. What we have is a scholarship program for postgraduate studies. And we provide for scholarships for outstanding students in some of our universities. There are some conditions to be filled, of course, but you find all the explanations on the website of our embassies. So if you are interested, this is where you will find all the relevant information. But there are no restrictions in principle. If you are admitted by the school in Switzerland, I see no problem.
First of all, good afternoon, sir. My name is Ivan Miljakovic. I'm a student of 4th year studies of this university, Department of English Language and Literature. And And I must say that I and actually we are honored to have you like a guest in this university. If I'm right, correct me if I'm not, but I believe that you have 4 official languages in your country, right?
So that I thought I had said it. Yes.
Yeah. So how does the country operate with 4 different languages, and are you satisfied with operating with 4 different languages?
Yes, I skipped one part of the discussion because it was a little bit technical. But I told you we have 3 levels of government: the confederation, the cantons, and the commune. And basically each level decides which languages are being used at that level. So, at the federal level, everybody can speak its own language and write in its own language. So I have colleagues who write, for instance, colleague diplomats who write reports, cables in Italian, and I'm supposed to understand. When we have meetings in Bern, within the federal administration, everybody speaks its own language. So you have meetings which start in French, continue in German. The only condition is that the German speakers must speak German and not their dialect, because we're not supposed to know that dialect. And German is the official language, not Swiss German. So that's how it operates at the federal level. And at the cantonal level, it's roughly the same thing, and at the communal level, it's again the same thing. In the bilingual cities, both languages are being used. So you have these funny things that sometimes you have documents, internal documents that you prepare for the government or for a minister, where the first paragraph is in French, the second is in German, then there is something in Italian, but that's okay, it works.
Thank you. I'm also interested in education. Is there different types of school for different types of languages where students can interact and operate?
Yeah, you can. The French speaker and the German speakers, they can complete their studies from the preschool all the way to the highest degrees in their own languages, in French or in German, and in almost all faculties, except there is only one which I think is only in German, which is to become a veterinary. I think to become a veterinary, you need to go to a German-speaking school. But other one, medical doctor, dentist, scientist, chemist, whatever, you can do either in French or in German. There is a small university in Italy, in the Italian part, in Ticino, which is where the total language is Italian, but it has very limited number of faculties. I think it's only information sciences and communication and marketing, something like that. So the Italian speakers, actually, they are a little bit discriminated, because if they want to complete their university studies in other areas than those 2, they will have to learn either German or French.
Hello everybody, I'm Elder Maksuti, and my question deals with English language, because I study English language, and Switzerland is an economic powerhouse, so you have a lot of foreign companies in your country. What's the educational and social plan for English language, and is it involved in government system and the educational system?
Look, officially, no. Children of expats working for big companies in Switzerland basically they have 2 choices. Either they go to the public school and they learn whatever, French or German, or they put their children in private schools where English is being taught, an international school, an American school, a British school. Then, because to do your high school in the public system, you can do that only in one of the official languages of Switzerland. It's only at the university level that some programs, but even rather at the master level than at the bachelor level, are either bilingual or English only. But especially at the postgraduate level. But to complete your high school and university, I'm sorry, but in Switzerland, I think most of the time you need to speak one of the national languages.
And you mentioned problem of youth speaking German or French. They don't communicate it at all. We have the similar problem here, for instance, in Vojvodina or in south of Serbia. So does the Swiss government have some type of plans for that and for...
Yeah, there is a plan like fostering exchange of students, fostering contacts between schools from the various linguistic regions, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work very well. But you know, for the time being, as long as everything is going well, as the economy is good, nobody really makes such a big problem about that. In the times of like 20 years ago, when the question of Switzerland accessing the European Union was very high on the agenda, and we had a referendum on that, then there was a real rift, a gap between the French-speaking region, which voted massively in favor of joining the European Union, and the German-speaking part, which voted massively against. And of course, since they are 63% and we are 20%, they won. But by a very small margin of 50.3%, they won. So for a long time, this European question, should we join, should we not join, has been dividing us, and it has been an issue of almost conflict between the French-speaking and the German-speaking part. But I must say that in the past 2-3 years, with what happens in the European Union, the problem has disappeared. There was a poll published last week about the popularity of the European Union in Switzerland, and unfortunately, probably unfortunately, it has dropped to 14%. And I think that everybody now, whatever the language or the community, is not in a hurry to join Europe.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Evo još jednom želim da se najtoplije zahvalim njegove ekscelencije ambasadoru Švicarske, koji je danas boravio 2 školska sata na našem univerzitetu. Zahvaljujem se i našim profesorima, posebno našim studentima. Nadam se da ovo samo početak nastavka saradnje novog ambasadora, a imajući u vidu da smo imali jako dobru saradnju u prethodnom periodu sa švicarskom ambasadom, tako da će ovo biti nastavak saradnje sa novim ambasadorom. Hvala najljepša.
Bilo bi to sve u ovom izdanju. Nas pratite na web i Facebook stranici. Do gledanja.